Okay, we're not frozen. Not frozen anymore. So I guess that's a win. Please be a win. Cancel. All right. Take 2 here. It wasn't YouTube this time. Shockingly. Dagnabbit. All right, let's wait for the people to show back up. I had like 9 people, and then it all went to heck. To heck in a handbasket. All right, I'm going to delete these because we didn't even get to the book club part. Everything went to heck. All right. Hello, everybody. This one wasn't YouTube. This was definitely not YouTube, but yes, I have the worst luck when it comes to streaming. Oh, man. All right, so let's delete those last 2 because they were not great. We didn't even get to the book club part. I was so bummed. All right. STEM Book Club, take 2. 3, actually, because I went live for like 2 seconds. But for once, like, it wasn't YouTube, I don't think. I think it was the camera client that we're using, the mini cam. So we're okay for now. If it freezes again, we'll go to the crappy webcam. But hopefully everything will be okay. Knock on wood here. All right, so we got 6 people. So we had about 9, I think, before the last stream, decided to take a dump. But hey, guys, welcome to the first ever STEM Book Club live stream. Has everybody here read the book? Hopefully. All right, if you are on the stream just for the heck of it, because you saw I was live, here's the deal. We're going to be talking about this book, Packing for Mars by Mary Roach. It's what we've been reading together for the last couple months. I read it super slowly and then took forever to figure out how I was going to do this. The format is going to be we're figuring this out because it's our first ever STEM book club. I wanted to try this feature out because YouTube now allows for chat replay. So the conversation that I have with you guys can be seen on the replay. So if anybody couldn't make the live stream, they're able to watch this. Hello, everybody's coming back. All right, good. Fingers crossed that the stream works this time. But essentially, I just wanted to give my thoughts on the book, talk about some of the cool stuff in here. I was going back through my notes today and went back and researched some things questions that I had when I was going through and reading. And I think it could be a lot of fun, but long story short, I read this book, I think it was either the end of my college career, the first time I read it, or when I was just had just started working. So it's been a while since I read this. So I went back through, and on the reread, it was so cool to see some stuff that I had the Felix Baumgartner jump, that hadn't happened yet when she wrote this book, and it hadn't happened yet when I read it the first time. So it was interesting to kind of go back through and see how things had changed historically since then. Thank you for picking a book I have read twice because holy plot postage notes, my schedule was insane this past week. You're welcome, Heather. Like I said, this is one of my favorite books, so I wanted to start off with this one. Also, just kind of wanted to reread it, so figured it would be a good deal. So we're going to talk a little bit about the book. I want you guys to have a conversation. I'll interact with you as we go. I'm going to run this since I got started late. Been going for about 3 minutes here. So we'll run this till about 5:40, 5:45 if everything holds up here. The plan was to just do it about 30 minutes so that if anybody wanted to rewatch, it wasn't too much of a task, too much of a hassle. So yeah, we'll go through it. If you read the book, feel free to have a conversation with each other, with me in the chat. Like I said, I will make sure that the chat replay, I don't know that I have to do anything, but I'll test it out when we get done here and make sure that everybody that watches this later will be able to see the chat replay. But yeah, with that, let's get into the book. I will give my thoughts and you guys talk about it. Still building Trebuchet does have one new office. Awesome. Would you talk about the cafeteria scene? Which cafeteria scene are you talking about? The one where they were analyzing their food? I think that was at JAXA, because that one was awesome. Thank you for doing this book club. Thank you for participating, Cynthia. I appreciate it. But yeah, we'll get going here. I love this book, first of all, just in case I haven't made that clear by saying it about 70,000 times. I love this book. I love the concept of it. We have a couple other Mary Roach books on my shelf behind me, and we will definitely, probably, most likely be reading those for STEM Book Club at another point. However, the next book is not one of her books. I have the next book picked out, and we will talk about it at the end of the stream. So yeah, like I said, this will just be a conversation. I'm going to talk about what I thought was cool. You guys talk about what you thought was cool. And at the end of this, I'll announce what the next book is, and then we'll read that one together. That one's going to be a heftier read, at least from what I'm looking at it. I just got it the other day. So yeah, let's talk. Packing for Mars. Like I said, it's one of my favorite books. I'm going to be looking down a lot because I took a lot of notes while I read this and then went back and like highlighted them so that I would know what to talk about. When they were drinking their fluids, recycled fluids. At NASA Ames. Yeah, that one. That chapter, it kind of made me curious to like go and visit Ames. Again, I haven't been in a while, and I don't think the couple times I've gone twice for like NASA socials, but I don't think when I went to the Ames centers that we ever talked about the studies that involved that. So I thought that was really interesting. It was funny. My old flight sims programs are also in there. That's awesome. But yeah, I love this book. My favorite thing is like she has like fantastic opening and closings of this book. On top of the opening sequence where she talks about, to a rocket scientist, you are a problem. You're the most irritating piece of machinery he or she will ever have to deal with. And then goes on to say, but to me, you are the best thing to happen to rocket science. And this is so relatable to me. I loved science growing up, and I always thought about being an engineer, and also thought about like other professions in science, and ultimately came to the realization that like I didn't want to have to deal with people. So engineering was like the way to go, because nuts and bolts and current and electricity and, apply like a force here, get a moment here, all that stuff makes sense to me. Science is like, it makes sense. Humans, on the other hand, that's like a whole nother thing. Satellites don't bleed or bite or talk back or anything. So for me, I was always just like, yes, I find that opening paragraph relatable. Robots don't fall in love with the commander. Exactly. And going through this, reading like her opening statement, I just kind of thought back to what one of the things I said when Elon Musk launched the Musk-mobile, as I call it now, into space. And it was just, we are a ridiculous but incredible species. Yes, that is true, that line. Robots don't fall in love with the commander. That was an awesome line. I remember she said that. I was like, yeah, but also they can't go to schools and speak. That is very true, Heather. Robots cannot go to schools and talk to kids about astronaut training. One up humans, point humans. One of the things that I really loved about Roach's writing style while we read this is just how funny she is. I really like that it's not like a super cut and dry science book. Like I've tried to read those before, and it's just really, really kind of tough to get through. Her humor is fantastic. Another thing that I was kind of going through today that I went back and actually did some research on was the IBMP. In chapter 2, she talks about the Mars 500 simulations that was being run at Moscow's Institute of Biological Problems. And I went back because the 500-day mission had yet to take place when she wrote the book, and it was supposed to take place in 2010. And I look back and it actually did happen. They went for 520 days from June 3rd, 2010 to November 4th, 2011. It was a 6-man crew made up of people from multiple, it was an international team. You had 3 Russians, 1 Frenchman, 1 Italian/Colombian man, and 1 Chinese man. And yes, they were all men. But it's kind of cool. I was looking, I actually looked up the names, and I realized that the Italian-Colombian gentleman, Diego Urbina, follows me on Twitter, and I follow him, and I was like, hey, that's awesome. So if you guys want to check him out, his name is Diego Urbina, I think, Urbina. He's on Twitter, so you can follow him. But he was one of the participants in the 500-day study. And it looks like reportedly all the subjects came out in optimal physical and psychological condition at the conclusion. I don't know where that report came from, but apparently later in 2013, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which has like the freaking most funny acronym in the world to me because I'm an immature child, reported that 4 of the 6 had sleeping issues. Some avoided exercise and hid, which is kind of like a hibernation-esque behavior. And then they also found that the circadian rhythm of autonomic nervous system activity was dampened during that. There was one story that really did bug me when I was reading this, and they talked about the sexual assault of Judith Lapierre when she participated in one of the simulations, and she went public despite the NDA. And there was like a lot of, in the year of Me Too and like with the Me Too movement, I found it that like that was really upsetting. The public reaction, or not the I don't know, I don't think it was like the public reaction, but it was just like the way it was like framed as she was overreacting and she was washing her dirty laundry in public, and that she was quote less the victim of sexual harassment than of institutional sexism. So sexism is, I'm not saying sexism isn't a problem, but this was sexual assault, and I had a big problem with the way that was framed. But it was just one of those, like, I know it's like a tough subject, but in the year of Me Too, I was just like, yeah, we're still doing that. We're still going through this, and it's still a problem that needs to be fixed. And it's definitely, and how, the whole thought of overreaction, the points of overreaction is something that we see with the Me Too movement today. That is like, it's very, there's a lot of parallels between how this situation was handled and the reactions to it from her male counterparts and the people around her. So it bugged me. And then just the general sexism in the space industry, the women being referred to as overly professional, and the floral print apron mentioned, just blah, gross. I'll not love Diego Arena. Yes, Diego U on Twitter. There you go. Thank you, Heather. I know R2 is a humanoid, basically a giant trash can, but we are doing C3PO next. See, like, I wouldn't want to be lectured by 3PO either, because he is just 3PO. Hence building drawing conclusions. Last one I worked on was Triceratops. Another interesting point that I found was the discussion on like mental health. You always think about like, yes, you have to be like mentally strong to be an astronaut, but the whole kind of stigma that they talked about, where astronauts are hesitant to ask for help or express issues because they don't want to get grounded. I thought that was kind of an important thing to bring up. You always think about like astronauts having like really great like mental fortitude and like mental health, being able to work under stress, and just being like A-type personalities. So I thought it was interesting, that kind of discussion of there is like a stigma, and nobody wants to get grounded as an astronaut. Heck, I didn't even like, for me, I'm medically grounded forever. I'm currently medically disqualified from the astronaut corps. I had a kidney stone in college, which automatically makes you unable to become an astronaut, because you're more likely to get kidney stones in space. Once you've had a kidney stone on Earth, you're more likely to get another one. So I'm medically DQ'd. So for me, like, that was heartbreaking. I cried harder about that than being like having to actually deal with the kidney stone. So I understand like not wanting to get grounded, but also just like the discussion of how important mental health issues are. Moving along through my notes. So moving on to chapter 4, the You Go First chapter, which talked about the poor rhesus monkeys, Albert 1 through Albert 6, that went out and just had like the most unsuccessful time. Like, they went through 6 of them, and I felt so bad, but at the same time, it was just like, oh my gosh. I mean, I don't know. I guess PETA wasn't like super active at that point, or they would have lost their minds. PETA's great. I love fighting with them on Twitter. But yeah, and then it kind of went on to talk about like the human test flights, and Harold von Beck, who was a doctor in Nazi Germany. And I had one comment on Twitter, and I can't remember who said it, but they kind of didn't like the framing of Nazis. But I think it's important to kind of acknowledge the fact that a lot of some of like our biggest accomplishments came from Werner von Braun, who was a card-carrying member of the Nazi Party. And I know there's a lot of debate about how much of a Nazi he was, but I was looking up today, and like one of the quotes from his memoirs, he talks about how he fared relatively rather well under totalitarianism. And I think that just kind of speaks to the fact that, yeah, he may have talked crap about Hitler and like disagreed with his views, but he still benefited from that society, and like still benefited from there and got to keep his job. And in no way can you really like not acknowledge the fact that there were problems, and the United States definitely looked past a lot of things to advance our space program. And Werner von Braun, like, with the V2, was a huge part of modern rocketry, but you can't just like gloss over certain parts of like him and his history when you're talking about the space program. So kind of transitioning to a lighter note. One of my favorite things in the book is actually my alma mater, Missouri S&T, formerly University of Missouri-Rolla, makes an appearance, and it's the Miners in Space crew. When they were talking about the reduced gravity office competition, it wasn't when I was there. It was the group, the phase of students, if you will. The group that had just graduated by the time I got there was the group that she flew on the Vomit Comet with. And the MSAT team, I worked on the satellite design team, and they were actually there was a lot of overlap between the satellite design team and the Miners in Space crew. And so even though these guys had graduated, there were a lot of grad students that knew them. And so I kind of became friends with one of them, and I asked him, I was like, hey, do you remember? And he goes, oh yeah, I remember something about an author. But some of the descriptions in there, a lot of times I was like, I wonder if that was the guy I know or not, when she was talking about just some of the stuff that was going on during the flight. Just a quick refresher, the Miners in Space experiment was that they were studying zero and reduced gravity welding, which I think is awesome. And I was kind of bummed. I went looking to see, in the book, she mentions that they'd never lost a parabolic flight. And I went looking, and then it was just like, oh man, yeah, the reduced gravity research program was canceled by NASA in 2014. And so now they have a contract with the Zero G company for their microgravity services. But I couldn't find any evidence that a Vomit Comet had crashed during parabolic flight. It looks like they had a close call quite a while ago when they were using it for like cargo transportation. And it was like taking off in a very cold environment. And that was apparently wreaked havoc on the aircraft. And so they almost crashed there, but it wasn't a parabolic flight, so it doesn't count. But yeah, I love that chapter. For me, that I think I cannot remember if that, I want to say I was in college. I want to say it was like my last semester of college, because I think I remember asking the PI for the MSAT team if he remembered her or not. So that's how long ago I read this book. So that would have been like 2012 at the absolute earliest I read this book. 2012 or 2011 or 2012, if I was in college. Another thing that I really liked in the book, when I love how she breaks down everything chapter to chapter. I think that's so awesome. And just goes through the different things that are evaluated in astronauts and things that are going to be important if we're doing long-term missions. I really, really, really enjoyed that. One thing that I learned from this book that I still carry with me today is like the discussion of motion sickness, how it's a sensory conflict, and it's an inner ear issue, and how you avoid it is like by focusing on the horizon, or because this was something I really, my mom struggled with it in the car, like motion sickness, like reading. And I never understood why I got sick reading in the car. And like I think my mom and a couple other members of my family don't like to sit in the back seat because it does get like motion sickness. And I never understood why that was. I always thought that was like weird as a kid. And then when I remember reading this book for the first time, and like reading about the sensory conflict, and like kind of having more of an understanding that, okay, like I feel like I'm moving, my inner ear freaks out about that. And I'm, my inner ear understands that I'm moving, but I'm looking at like a page. So that it kind of helped me like manage my motion sickness a little bit better, but also understand it. I really enjoyed that. But yeah, I remember my fave chapter titles were throwing up and down. Yes, and Houston, we have a fungus. She has some fantastic titles. And I love them. I love them so much. I've not read any of her other books. I have a bunch of them on my to-read list, but like just the chapter titles alone made me stoked to read more about this. Also, one thing I noticed, I didn't pick up on it the first time I read this book, but humans are immune if their inner ears are non-functional. So my father is profoundly deaf, and he's, to my knowledge, has never really gotten motion sickness. So I always kind of wondered if that was why he never got motion sickness that I knew of. Yeah, the cadaver in the space capsule, that was a great one too. One Furry Step for Mankind, talking about more like unfortunate monkeys that flew, and how Enos was a total and complete jerk. Is my favorite. But yeah, I like the discussion. I like that she talked about early NASA stuff, because I just love kind of going through and just like all the stuff that we think is ridiculous. But I'm, like, oh my gosh, is there, what's going to happen when we send guys up in space? And it's just all the stuff that the guys freaked out about, but they literally didn't know. So it's kind of like having to adjust my lens and going, oh, it's not so silly to think this when you have no idea because you've never been to this like brand new environment. But I absolutely love going all the way back and talking about how they were worried about like eye shape change and will it cause blindness, just all those different concerns they had. Will the astronaut freak out just at various things, and how like Yuri Gagarin wasn't really actually even allowed to fly his capsule. Loki just broke in to the office. You can stay if you don't make noise. If you saw like the tail that just came. It's International Pet Day, so that's appropriate, I guess. What is right? Oh, it's the monitor top. I just figured out that like my monitor is kind of a little bit obscured. All right, well, I guess he's gonna sit here. Hey, Craig. Yes. Loki's in here with me. Can you close the door so that I don't have to hear you washing dishes? But I appreciate you washing dishes. T Butler's doing good. Going back to the book, I really liked the anecdote about the Apollo 15 crew like faking. Now he wants out. He's such a fickle dog. The Apollo crew faking the seatbelt issue so that they could pick up a moon rock. I loved that. Just the discussion of rovers and like rovers then versus rovers now with cabs and cup holders. And that nobody likes to be micromanaged. And in my notes, I have I have like a little thing that says like eat crap, insert manager's name here that used to micromanage me all the time. And then what else? Oh yeah. One of my favorite quotes was talking about Apollo 8 and how they were talking about all the different components. Like everybody always talks about like how can you mess up? If there's like a rocket failure or something, people are the worst. And like you're NASA, like how do you not screw up? Like how are you going to screw up so much all the time? And like we've been doing this forever. Loki, you got to pick one, my dude. He's nudged the door open again. I don't mind him in here. It's just I can hear you. Thank you. I'm the worst talk bomb ever. I'll acknowledge it. But going back to that, one of my favorite quotes was Apollo 8 has 5,600,000 parts. Even if all functioned with 99.9% reliability, we would expect 5,600 defects. And in my notes, I have space is hard because it is. And that's one thing that people like don't understand when they talk about engineering. And it's not just space, it's engineering in general. And building something is you have so many moving parts that there's bound to be something that goes wrong, and you plan for the worst. Like you try to like capture every failure possible and redundancy and what have you. So, but at the end of the day, something might slip through, and that's just the fact of the matter, especially when you're like working in an environment that just requires so much planning and so much complexity. And so that was like one thing I, as an engineer, really appreciated that quote. Houston, we have a fungus. Moving on to one of Heather's favorite chapters. This chapter was so gross. I struggled so hard getting through that. Just talking about like the armpits and then not showering and just like oh gosh, it was so gross. The peak smelliest. I felt so bad when they did the 2 men, 2 weeks, no bathing. I was like, my note is, hasn't Jim Lovell been through enough? The answer is yes, Jim Lovell has been through enough. But it was so gross. I had a gentleman on Twitter, I think it was Andrew Ward, who was talking about it, how he couldn't get through this chapter. It was just too gross. It was nasty, but it's stuff that they have to think about. And I think, that's going to be the worst. It's going to be the worst job in the world. It's a good chapter though. Wherever we go, we take our bodily functions. Yes, it is a good chapter. And somebody has to think about it. There's somebody that is paid to think about these things and come up with solutions, but just, oh no, it's so gross. Yes. Then the horizontal stuff. And I'm so glad Heather's here because Heather, you participated in one of these studies, yeah? The laid out, the horizontal studies. Basically in the chapter, Mary is at the Flight Analogs Research Unit, or FARA, at the University of Texas Medical Branch. And basically participants have to spend 3 months, 24 hours a day, must be lying down, and they're mimicking the body degradation experienced in zero gravity. So you're looking for like bone loss and muscle atrophy. And the idea is that they're trying to figure out how to counteract this. Mary walked out to Apollo, rusty Just sign a barf bag. That's amazing. Oh, that's so great. I love that. And she would. It's one of those things like you go through it and you definitely like reading her book. It's just all right. It's one thing that just yeah, that totally sounds like something she would do. Okay, cool. But I just yeah, this chapter was amazing, and I don't know how people do it. And yes, I did 3 of those gravity sims, and I almost barfed myself. Space sickness ain't for sissies. I just yeah. Yeah, talking about, just the lay down studies where you have to be 24 hours a day, and they talked about, how you have to be at, like, a slight incline, and just I felt for the guys. I felt for them so much. Uh Muscles return quickly when the astronauts turn. So the whole reason that they do this is because your muscles return quickly when astronauts return to Earth, but the bone takes 3 to 6 months to recover. Estimates indicate a 2-year trip to Mars will cost 1/3 to 1/2 of our bone mass, which is similar to what paraplegics experience in their lower bodies. So, bone loss is a huge, 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 huge issue that astronauts are trying to, not astronauts, but astronauts are going to have to deal with, and NASA is trying to counteract. One thing I did look up, they were talking about for bears during hibernation, how their calcium has to go somewhere since they don't excrete waste during hibernation, and they would build up a lethal concentration otherwise. And they also don't experience, and that's kind of one of the reasons they don't experience bone loss during their 4 to 7 months of hibernation is their calcium in their blood gets used and gets sent back, like gets kept in their bones. They don't experience bone loss. So one thing I looked up, I had a study. They talked. Mary discussed a study where she talked about how some people were synthesizing hormones with the hope to eventually test on postmenopausal women because postmenopausal women experience bone loss more. I think it's like we're more prone to osteoporosis after menopause, and it's basically they're trying to synthesize the bear's parathyroid hormone. And I actually went and looked up this research today. It's being done by a gentleman named Seth Donahue from he was in Michigan Tech in 2011, so I couldn't find anything past 2012. But as of 2011, Seth Donahue had a $1 million grant from the NIH to grow bone-making cells to treat with human or bear parathyroid hormone, and then compare the two. And then also he had a second study. He was doing a second study to see if the bear hormone could be used to treat osteoporosis. And he had just filed an application with the FDA to work on the treatment. It looks like it was published in 2012 under the very wordy title. I will read it slowly if anybody wants to look this up. Black bear parathyroid hormone has greater anabolic effects on trabecular, TRABECULAR, bone in dystrophin, dystrophin deficient mice than in wild type mice. It looks like a really interesting study. I struggled. I had to read a couple of the sections probably 2 or 3 times before I gleaned much information. But eventually I wound up. It looks like a really interesting study, and I actually may go back and read the thing in full. I was just trying to get notes for the live stream today. But going back, I went scroll down to the bottom, and the TLDR of it looks like the black bear, specifically black bear hormone is an effective therapeutic to combat bone loss in cases of dystrophin deficiency. They only used high doses in that study, and they looked like further research they would need to study dose responses, so kind of adjust the dose and see how the human body responded to that. But it was incredibly interesting. So yeah, I would highly recommend you look that up if that's something that you're really interested in, if that's one of your fields. For the I think what I googled was like bear parathyroid hormone, and that was actually one of a couple of the like first things that popped up. Oh my gosh, I've been going forever. Like I talked about earlier, one of my favorite things was rereading about the Felix Baumgartner testing his spacesuit for the Stratus jump. At the time, he was expected to hit 690 miles per hour. He actually hit 833.9 miles per hour. They talked about they didn't think high altitude spin would be a problem for him about that. For any of you that haven't watched that video, I would highly encourage you. It's terrifying, but the dude survived. I also thought that like the discussion about the readout was interesting. They talked about Mariah Nagasu. I totally just messed up her pronunciation. I think Mariah Nagasu, the Olympic figure skater who had just landed, when I was reading this, she had just landed, was it the triple in the Olympics, and which was amazing to watch. I know very little about figure skating. I think they're really cool and very graceful. But I'm just not good with it. But yeah, it's cool to read about that. And like I said, it's so interesting. And she had done that in 2010, so I didn't realize that she had been skating for that long. Skipping through some of the other stuff, the separation anxiety chapter, which was amazing. Separation anxiety. Yes, she is, Heather. That's my mom. I thought the separation anxiety chapter was hysterical, but also kind of gross because talking about like how to do the poops in space. Chapter 15, discomfort food. I love that we talked about May O'Hara, dietitian for the U.S. Air Force during Apollo days. I love talking about women that were in the space program, like involved in the space program during the Apollo era. I love that. So I was very excited to read about her and some of the stuff that she said. Had to talk about in that chapter. It was very interesting, especially how many of the people working on the food were not vegetarians, veterinarians. Read my handwriting. So not terribly concerned about morale, just wanted to get them the nutrition. And I guess thank you, Heather. But closing thoughts, I really love like her discussion of why I go to space, the Ben Franklin quote at the end. And then just the final quote is my favorite, but I'll save that for the sign off at the end. But yeah, do you guys, I've run way longer than I intended to. Do you guys have any closing, like have any thoughts, have anything that you want to discuss about the book? It's one of my favorite books ever. So to get to read it with you guys, I just kind of flew through this. Like I said, we're figuring out format. This is live stream number 1. And hopefully in the future, we'll get like more people involved. It'll be great. It'll grow and we'll all read really cool STEM books together. It'll be awesome. But yeah, I'm going to go through Twitter really quick and read. My only complaint, she regrettably but typically offers abundant male opinions while minimizing the female experience inside space agencies. Yeah, you are absolutely right, Heather. There were a lot of male opinions in this book. Like I said, I was very excited when we got to talk to May O'Hara, and I think Peggy Whitson for like a little bit. But I would have appreciated more women, particularly. It kind of does the Apollo 13 thing in my eyes, where you don't really realize that women were involved in the space program at all because you don't hear them. But generally credits all workers as being pieces of the larger puzzle and doesn't just flow through a parade for those inside yes, I do love that. I do love that the people besides the astronauts get the credit when they talk about all the various scientists that were involved. But like you said, I do agree. I wish that there were more women involved. And I wonder if today, if she rewrote the book, or if she was just writing it today for the first time, if it would be different and more women would be included, particularly with like the popularity of Hidden Figures and movies like that. I wonder if that would be something that she would think more about. I would hope so, because it's just in like recent years, I've come to like learn a lot more of the stories of the women behind the scenes, and I crave more of those stories, and I wish that more of them were talked about in books. So going to Twitter, reading some of the comments on Twitter that I just pulled really quickly right before I started the stream. Howie Pepper says, I haven't quite finished it yet. He was on page 293 when he sent this. This was a little bit ago. He may have finished it by now. I mentioned his comment because he couldn't make the stream. He messaged me and I felt really bad. But it was just one of those things. I wanted to involve everybody in the conversation, and I thought having it live would be good. So I felt really bad. But I wanted to read his comment. He hadn't quite finished the book yet, but overall really, really liked the book and the author's writing style. She made what could have been a fairly dry reading quite enjoyable. And the book was really nostalgic for me because I grew up during the space race, and which that's awesome. As somebody that didn't grow up during the space race, I loved it, but I can't imagine how cool that has to be to kind of see the behind the scenes and read the different behind the scenes stuff from that era, like that is captured in this book. Andy Ward, at Andy J. Ward, still working through it. I really did try to make it through chapter 6, but my stomach said no. I feel you. I feel you, Andy. I do. I relate. Kevin Healy at Kevy Kev. I'm about halfway through. I'm having fun with the journey. It's interesting to compare her trip to Russia to her trip to Canada. The attitude of the retired Merc cosmonauts versus the astronaut hopefuls is striking. I didn't know cadavers were used in some testing scenarios. This was an interesting chapter. While I can see the benefits, I can appreciate some of the more reserved, that just ain't right feelings some of the team had. I also didn't know that some of the capsule guys flew through space naked and stinky. I'm in the middle of a move, and I can only imagine how stinky those guys were. Yeah, the stinky chapter, that is what absolutely got me. It was just too much. I finished it, but I don't remember being not affected by it the first time. That's why it was really interesting to reread this, because just kind of compare how I felt when I read it the first time. And I was like, man, I don't remember having this is like gaggy reaction that I'm having right now to reading this chapter. So I thought that was really interesting. But with that, you guys have any final thoughts? Anything like you want to discuss? Any chapters that like you really loved? How did you feel about the book on a scale of 1 to 10? And if nobody has anything else to talk about, I will announce what the next book is. So I will give you guys a couple minutes in the comment section to gather your thoughts on how you like the book. How did you like the book? That's one thing I would really wonder, particularly if you're not like a space human like myself. I love this stuff. I will read about it all day, every day. I love space things. So for me, this is my bread and butter. This is what my career is built on. So I love this stuff. I've loved it since I was like a little tiny kid. But I would be curious to see how somebody who necessarily isn't like a huge space nut, which how can you not be? But I get it. So maybe space isn't your first love, like how you enjoyed the book. So if you're watching this later, please feel free to comment down below with your thoughts on the book. If you read it with us and just didn't have time to join the stream, please leave your comment down below. I read every comment that you guys leave on videos, and I really appreciate them. So if you've got comments, if you want to get involved in the conversation, just leave it in the comment section down below. I will read through those like I always do. Best book, but if you're not a space nut, it will probably make you think putting humans in space is disgusting and troublesome. that is a potential reaction to this book. But yeah, like I said, if you guys are watching this later and you have comments, leave them in the comment section down below. But without further ado, I will announce the next book for the STEM Book Club. And like I said, it's a little heftier, so it may take longer to read. But the next book that we're reading is The Song of the Dodo by David Quammen, I think. But this is the book, if I hold it in front of the camera. So if you have read this already, congrats, you're already like way ahead of the rest of us. It is a little bit heftier with finer print and stuff like that. This was recommended by a friend on Instagram, Summer Ash. Totally go check her out on Twitter. She's amazing. But she recommended this book, and I had a different book picked out that I had read. So it was going to be another reread for me, but it was going to be a way more recent reread. So I slotted this in instead. I just got here this week. This one will take a while, but once I get done reading this, we'll do the same thing again where I put out like a call to arms like a week before, and then we'll do another one of these live streams because I think this went well. Sound off, like send me smiley emojis if you think this went well in the comment section. But yeah, this will be the next book. If you don't own this book already, again, I encourage you to go to the STEMulus website, STEMulus.com. Like I said, there are, in the first video, there's a lot of affiliate programs that you can go through that will help the STEMulus, like Better World Books if you want to buy a used copy. I love them. If you want more information about them, please go check out the very first STEM Book Club video. I talk a lot about them and their mission and why I love them. So if you go to the STEMulus website and click through their banner at the top of the page, it'll take you to their website and you can buy through there, and that will help the STEMulus. I also have an audible.com affiliation. It's up on the website. It's Amazon. So I think that if you go through there, you can also get to the Amazon site. And I think that also helps the STEMulus. So if you want to buy books, there's plenty of opportunities. Loki is crying at the door. He's so upset I'm in here without him. But yeah, this will be the next book we read. So I imagine in a month or two, I'll get through it. April is a little crazy for me. May is looking less busy. So hopefully I'll be able to get through all of this, but I'm very excited to dig into this book. We'll do this again in a couple of months. I appreciate everybody that tuned in. Thank you guys so much. Once you guys start getting the books, let me know. I'm probably going to wait a couple of days to start reading this just so I give you guys time to grab the book online. The Loki has arrived. Come here, bub. But with that, we hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week. Stay well, stay awesome. And to quote the final line in Mary Roach's book, Packing for Mars, let's go out and play. Bye, guys.